Hello everyone, I am Tyler Caldwell, and with me today is the mastermind behind Stolen Throne Cigars, Mr. Lee Marsh. Thank you so much for coming through today. Just a little background for folks at home. You and I have been friends for a handful of years now, and we've always been trying to get you an opportunity to come here and film with us, to do something like this, to spread the gospel of Stolen Throne.
Yeah, I'm sketchy. I'm never in one place long enough.
That's true. I agree with that. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's educate the people watching this, the background, a little bit of story of Lee Marsh and how Stolen Throne came to be.
Yeah, man, it's just been a passion project, right? You know, you've been around, so, I mean, you've known me since the beginning. Stolen Throne has always been our journey through tobacco, right? And it's, for us, it's about a brand on quality and fair price point, and being the working man cigar or lady. Mm-hmm. So for us, it's like, you know, we're very conscious about our price point. We're very conscious about our quality and all those things that wrap into what Stolen Throne is, right? It became, we joke that we're the outlaw brand, but really we're just doing things we think the way it should be done.
Sure.
You know? And it's been 5 years and it's flown by, right? Like it's been insane. It feels like 50, but it's been 5, which is awesome. So
a lot of sleepless, restless nights, but it comes with the package.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Very cool, man. So, what was the initial idea of, like, what made you want to use a name like Stolen Throne? Like, what's the philosophy behind the brand?
So, like, I've told this story a bunch, right? And I think the hardest part for me was naming the company, because everything about us, we're authentic, we're transparent, like we're living our story, like we are who we are. And I didn't want something that was disingenuous, right? I just didn't want some moniker that we would have to sell every time we showed up. So it was really difficult, you know? And then it got to a point where we kind of had the proverbial, you know, get off the pot kind of thing, right? So it just ended up being this. There is a long expletive story about it, but really at the end of the day, it's about making our way in the world and like making our own place at the table, and especially being a first generation cigar maker in an industry full of legacy brands and, you know, multiple generations and those kind of things. So just about kind of making your own way in the world, you know?
Absolutely. And that falls in line with the term you said, being like the outlaw brand.
Sure.
You know, like, and I actually really love that. You know, one thing I've always respected about you as a person and like the philosophy of the brand is, you know, you take people like a Steve Saka, you take people like a Robert Caldwell, for example, people who are very like, they hold no punches. It's very like about transparency, you know. And I feel like that's kind of how you and Stolen Throne are represented as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's no over-romanticized story or anything like that.
No, man, the work is the work. I always say that, right? Like, and it's just one of those things, like, I don't begrudge anyone that does it differently. This is just the iteration of how I think the company should be ran and how we should make cigars, right? Mm-hmm. That doesn't make me right and everybody else wrong. It's just our way of doing it, right? And for us, it's about living with what we're doing. Absolutely. So like, we're not used car salesmen, we're not lipstick on the pig, right? Like, it's not, that's just not who I am. And so I wasn't going to portray that into a business, you know? So that it kind of, it's shaken out. But like the outlaw thing started as a joke because like we weren't paying for advertising. We weren't like starting our company with a Connecticut, Habano, and Maduro like everybody else with 15 SKUs, right? Like we launched the Crook in 2 sizes. And that was it. And so like it was just kind of paving the path with how we wanted to do it, and it's kind of worked out, right? And it shows that like it's still so real that 5 years in, people are so into it and so supportive, and like you guys have been great and super supportive of me, and so has like all the consumer base as well. Sure. So like it's kind of become our moniker that we're the outlaw brand, but it's just a joke, you know? Like we're just kind of doing our thing.
But it works. It works for you guys, you know?
Sure.
So before you decided to say, what the hell, I'm going to start a cigar brand, you know, no one just quits their 9 to 5 and just goes into it, right? So what were you doing before you got into this?
So I kind of had a kind of weird path into cigars, right? So I traveled a lot. I was in IT. I did some contracting work. And then, you know, all that time I spent on the road, right? So like downtime was in cigar shops all over the world and kind of getting into it. And like I always tell this to people, especially consumers, I don't think they grasp it. Like it feels like a big industry, but it's super small. Like we know everyone. So you meet people, right? And then it kind of starts building, and then like that fire gets started, right? The first factory tour and farm tour I did in La Romana years ago kind of started this like passion, like, and almost like subconsciously, like I didn't even know that was a thing. And then I was like, it just kept building and building and building, and I was finally like, I'm tired of working for other people, and so maybe I could do this. Stupid stuff we always say, like, I can do that.
Sure.
And I just happened to try it out and go all in, right? There's no such thing as being halfway pregnant. So we went all in, you know. So,
Absolutely.
And here we are.
Very cool. So I would imagine in those travels, you know, because all of your stuff comes from the Rojas factory, and I would imagine those travels, that's where you met Noel, or like
Yeah,
how did that
so
connection
actually
come
it's
about?
a pretty funny story. Like the person that actually put us together was Island Jim.
Okay.
So like he knew us both independently, and he was like, you know, he was like the first person to ever call me a cigar nerd. But I was with him at the Leaf and Bean, and I was talking about my aspirations and things that I wanted to do, and he was like, man, I know exactly who you should work with. He was like, Noel Rojas. And it was just kind of serendipitous, man. Like Noel and I had one conversation, and it kind of clicked, and I was like, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. And he's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I'll be on the next flight to come see you in Dallas tomorrow. And then that was like 7-8 years ago. And so here we are now at the Rojas factory, and another factory on the, you know, in working its way up right now, and the brand and everything we got going on. Rojas Cigars are doing really well, us as well. So it's been a ride, man. It's been a ride. And I think that that's kind of the thing, and you and I talk about this all the time, is like, people have this notion of like the overnight success of Stone Throne Cigars, which I guess is true from the outside looking in, but really there was years of stuff added to it, right?
A lot of work put into place.
Yeah, there was a lot more before we sold our first cigar. Like there was so much more time and effort we were doing before our first cigar, right, was ever sold. So that's why it feels like it's been 50 years, not 5.
Sure. Yeah, I will say, you know, talking about Noel, I met him for the first time a couple years ago at the PCA trade show.
Yeah.
And not in a disrespectful way, but he was a little intimidating at first because he's
the resting Cuban face.
You know, he's very reserved.
Yeah.
And you know, I remember coming over to the booth because you guys were sharing the booth and everything, and you know, we had chatted, and then we had a meeting with Noel, and he was just very like that kind of like mafia stare at you. And
he takes a lot of things in, man. The guy's brilliant, right? So he's like self-taught, it's bilingual, but like he does take stuff in and thinks about like the things he says before he says it. Because we used to tease him about that all the time. Ask him about, next time we see him, ask him about Ferrari Jim and his pause. Jim was like, you ever notice how you pause before you speak? But like, no, I mean, he's awesome. He has a passion for cigars and tobacco and for the consumer, right? So he is awesome. He's I'm very lucky, you know, he's a close friend, my mentor, my brother, right? We've done so much together, we've been through a lot together, so, and we're just getting started. So right. It's been a wild ride, man, for sure.
That's awesome, man. So, knowing that all the product comes from the Rojas facility and everything, let's get a little bit into the product. So we said that the Crook of the Crown was the first release. Originally only came out in Robusto and Toro.
Correct.
Do you want to let people know a little bit about the process or the blend, anything like that?
The blend has always been the same. It's Mexican San Andreas Maduro over an Indonesian binder, all Nicaraguan fillers. That was our baby, and the catalyst behind that cigar was, you know, being the quote-unquote cigar geek, right? Like, I like to smoke everything. And still now, I smoke a lot of other brands and whatnot. But it was like in this mindset of like, you don't want to smoke the same cigar over and over again, but what if you could make a cigar where it never got boring, right? Like I could smoke that cigar first, last, doesn't matter. And the Crook is that. I can smoke that at 4 in the morning and I can smoke it as the last cigar at night. And it kind of, that was like the precipice. And then we built from there with the call to arms afterwards. And then the Three Kingdoms really, what a lot of people don't realize is that I wanted that to be our second cigar, but it took me 3 years to get that to go.
Okay.
And then, we just launched the Yorktown Fleet last year. And now we're doing the Crook Corona Year of the Crook, the 5-year anniversary to celebrate 5 years.
5 years going on 50.
That's right, man. It ain't about the years, it's the miles.
Absolutely.
And then you're smoking something new?
Something new here.
Something new. So that'll come out at PCA 2025.
Any details you want to
so we...
the secret files?
Yeah, a little bit. It's we're working on a Habano Claro right now. So it's Ecuadorian Habano with a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So it's... What do you think?
I will say my first notion was, for the folks who don't know, you did have your first limited release with the Phantom Queen.
Yeah.
I noticed the size comparison.
Yeah.
But clearly it's, not Connecticut, it doesn't have that profile, but there are some similarities to it.
A little bit.
But it's got that rich creaminess, but there's a little tangy, zestiness going along with it, especially on the retro. So
yeah, the big thing for me on that blend is there's a nice lingering spice, and then just a little bit of tang, like a citrus sourness on it too, which is really addicting and
almost like a sourdough bread, almost kind of.
Yeah, it's a cool cigar. I think people are gonna dig it. I do love that size, the 5x54 Bellicoso. So yeah, you'll see that in a Robusto and the 5x54 Bellicoso.
Very cool, man. That is awesome. So you brought up Call to Arms was your second release. Is there any significance behind the name or the history of it?
Not really. Once we came up with the Crook, it kind of just fell into place. It's been really easy to stay on brand, and I hate to disappoint people because I always see the pride in their eyes when they're about to ask how do you come up with the names? I never know. They just come to me. We'll just be sitting around, bullshitting at the headquarters or whatever, and I'll be oh, that's a pretty good name for a cigar, and think about it, right? Some things have more meaning than other. I get lost in thought on some things, but generally it just kind of comes to you a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
I can say just from personal experience, a local shop in town originally started carrying the Crook of the Crown, and I was very, very close with the owner, and he sent me a message one day. He was I got the new one in, you got to come try this. And to this day, the Call to Arms Corona is my favorite of the line, and I would put it in the top 10 favorite cigars of all time.
I appreciate that, man. That's a really cool cigar, right?
Yeah.
And so
it's so different.
It is, and so that was kind of the big pain point, right? If you want the backstory, I was because the Crook blew up, right? The Crook became a thing of its own, and I was no matter what I do, people are gonna compare it to that cigar, right? So it had to be so different. And the Call to Arms to me is our most elegant brand. It's the most blend. It's the blend that's just, it's refined, it's exquisite, it's complex and deep, but it's not overwhelming. But so it kind of fits everyone. The guys that love Crooks and Three Kingdoms, the heavier stuff, they love it too, And so it's kind of everything to everybody. And I know you can never do that. I always say don't do that, but I do think it's the most elegant blend that we've put out, because it's just so meaningful, and it's massive in Europe, right? So a lot of people that are wanting some new world cigars and used to smoking Cubans love the Call. So yeah, I agree with you. That's a great cigar, especially in the Corona.
Oh, absolutely. So, knowing a little bit of your history now, do you recall your first experience with a cigar? What got you? What was a cigar that you were just wow, this makes me want to be a cigar smoker and potentially start my own brand?
I do remember my first cigar, but it wasn't the same cigar that made me want to delve deeper into this journey and make cigars. My first cigar was a farm roll that my uncle brought back from the military with him. He was a Marine. But the cigar that really got me in, kind of hit that switch of oh, this is different, was the old Camachos.
Okay.
The old Camacho Corojos by the Aurora family. That was the cigar that kind of this isn't your typical cigar, right? This is there's more going on here. And so that started the journey and the build up, and then of course I went through the boutique path of like smoking new and like all what's going on, and then, but you also pick up the things that you don't like, you know. So it's like, but that was the cigar that kind of started the journey, if you will, that ended up making it, you know, Stolen Throne Cigars.
That's awesome, man. So listen, Lee, I really appreciate you coming through, doing this little interview video with us.
My pleasure, man.
Everybody at home, make sure you check out smokingpipes.com, check out Stolen Throne, a short portfolio, but some of the best portfolio on the website and on the market, so definitely check them out. Look forward to the new release once this comes out, and make sure you hit the subscribe button and check out future videos and more information to come.